Hey, what you guys doing?
Hey there. We are just learning about Florence Nightingale and what she's done throughout the years.
Different levels of education for nurses throughout the era.
Yeah, and nursing schools founded throughout history.
Oh, sounds pretty cool and pretty interesting. You think you could tell me more?
Pull up a chair. All right.
The first real school of nursing was opened in 1836 in Kaiserwerth, Germany. This is where Florence Nightingale attended school. Florence Nightingale led care for soldiers during the Crimean War with a team of nurses. This team of nurses was composed of 38 untrained, self-proclaimed nurses. During this time, soldiers were more likely to die from infection than their actual wound itself. Because of this, Florence wanted to establish a complete turnaround in military hospitals. She implemented hand washing and the washing of clothes and linens. She also did not want her nurses out past dark, and she herself would go by lamp to her patients, earning her the nickname the Lady with the Lamp. She made mortality rates at Barak Hospital in Turkey drop from 42% to 2% with her new interventions. Florence Nightingale opened Nightingale Training School in London in 1860. Another figure during this time was Mary Seacole. She managed and provided care to many patients during the cholera epidemic in 1850. Initially, she was rejected from the London War Office for the color of her skin. She used her knowledge in tropical medicine such as herbs and plants to treat cholera, malaria, yellow fever, and diarrhea.
So from about 1860 to 1900, there were a lot of changes made in the nursing field. The Civil War started, and that required a lot of women to be not in the front, but they were the kind of behind the scenes people. They took care of the wounded, made sure that no infections were started. Of course, Florence Nightingale had her principles stretched the entire time. This era really brought nursing to become a profession and not just something done at home. Dorothea Dix was involved, and so was Clara Barton. Clara Barton was not only in the Civil War, but she also formed the American Red Cross in 1882. And the first nursing school was started in America in 1873, and it was the Bellevue Hospital area. And they decided to run everything by Florence Nightingale's principles. So that, I think, really played a part in how nursing is today.
In 1929, World War I era. In 1903, the states began taking steps that led to monitoring of practical nursing organizations. Army nurses mainly served in Fort Bayard, San Francisco, and the Philippines until 1911. Their assignments expanded after that to places like Hot Springs, Arizona, Texas, and Washington, D.C. In 1914, Mississippi was the first state to pass a law to license practical nurses, but it wasn't mandatory until 1938. The National League of Nursing Education developed a system that was nationwide that standardized nursing requirements for practical nurses. The Smith-Hughes Act of 1917 provided funding for creating new practical nursing schools. In 1919, the first high school vocational practical nursing program opened at Minneapolis Girls Vocational High School. African American nurses were admitted to the Corps in 1918 for the first time. World War I was the first war that nurses had professional training. Jane Delano from the American Red Cross recruited nurses and trained and equipped them for overseas. They weren't allowed to serve on advanced dressing stations, which were on the front lines. Most nurses served in hospitals treating wounds in field hospitals near the front. They mainly dealt with communicable diseases, wounds, infections, shock, hemorrhage, and poison gas inhalation. The national nursing leaders at that time were M. Adelaide Nutting, Ann Goodrich, and Lillian Wald. They formed the National Emergency Committee of Nursing. Around that time is when nurses started going to training programs in schools and education for nursing. In the 1920s, nurses were given ranks such as lieutenants and majors, and their pay was about half of what the males made.
So in the 1930s, we had the Great Depression. During this time, there were way too many nurses, so it left for like high unemployment, shorter days. But during this time, they also realized that nursing shouldn't just be a one-for-one deal. They needed to work as teams because there were fewer of them and they had bigger things to do. During World War II, there were more than 100,000 nurses that volunteered. And in 1949, legislative measures passed for nurses to actually become licensed, both RN and LPN. So this is whenever we started to have like our separation of what the two actually did. In 1953, Lillian Patterson was appointed by President Truman to become a nurse advisor to the World Health Organization. So that was a big help, like a big step for all nurses. Nurses were used in hospitals and overseas. LPNs were basically able to just like bandage and give the home type of care, and RNs could pierce the tissue starting in 1955, so that was a big step for all of us. Nightingale's principles lasted all the way through this. Many more nursing schools were formed using her principles. So I think she had a big role in this era just because of the fact of schools becoming like a big thing, and that nursing finally got out there to be registered and to be looked at as a profession.
During 1956 through 1973, it included the Vietnam War. In 1956, Public Law 911 provided millions of dollars to expand and improve practical nursing programs to provide for more public health personnel. By 1975, there were 1,337 programs, and 46,080 practical nurses graduated because of it. 1961 through 1973, about 7,484 nurses enlisted in the Vietnam War for tuition forgiveness, free medical and dental care, travel opportunities, and love for their country. Most nurses were recent grads in their 20s with less than 6 months experience. 1965, the American Nurses Association presented a solution on how to solve the issues of the different levels of the nursing profession. They recommended that all RNs graduate from a 4-year collegiate program and all LPNs graduate from a 2-year technical program. In 1970, June 11th, Colonel Anna May Hayes was the first woman and nurse in American military to become a brigadier general and first to attain general office rank. 1971, the National Black Nurses Association, a nonprofit entity, was established and founded by Dr. Loran Sands. NBNA's mission is to represent and provide a forum for Black nurses to advocate and implement strategies to ensure access to the highest quality of health care for persons of color. In the 1990s, the unlicensed assistive personnel were hired to give patient care. At this time, LPN's primary employment moved out of hospitals and into the community. In 1994, the first computerized adaptive test, or the NCLEX PN, was available to practical vocational nursing graduates. In 2000, an increased demand for LPNs and LVNs in nursing homes and extended care happened, and the demand was down in hospitals. In February 2003, the first contingent of military nurses supporting the U.S. invasion of Iraq were sent to Kuwait. The HRSA reports a shift from acute care to long-term and community-based care. From the U.S. Nursing Service reports trends in supply and education. Florence Nightingale remains relevant in wars today with her introduction of aseptic techniques, keeping the death rate tolls down.
Wow, I didn't realize how Florence Nightingale's contributions changed the nursing practice today and how they now influence the way we learn. It will be interesting to see all of the advancements that will come from our generation of nurses from all levels of education and how the medical field will be changed by this.